She gave away her last $20 to a stranger on a park bench, a man she had never met, a man who looked like he had nothing. And the very next morning, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up in front of her school and changed everything she thought she knew about what a single act of kindness could set in motion. But here is the part nobody talks about. It was not the rich man who mattered most in this story. It was not the money or the SUV or even the scholarship that came later. The part that matters, the part that will stay with you long after this story ends, happened in a broken apartment on a Wednesday night, when a girl with nothing left to lose chose to respond to cruelty not with rage, not with tears, but with something so quietly powerful it brought a dangerous man to his knees without a single threat being spoken. This is the story of Maya Johnson. And if you think you already know where it goes, you do not. The apartment at the corner of 63rd and Halstead had a radiator that clanked all winter like something trapped inside the walls, a front door whose lock only worked if you lifted the handle at exactly the right angle, and a kitchen window that let the Chicago wind whistle through a gap no amount of tape had ever truly sealed. Maya Johnson had lived there her entire 17 years of life, and she loved it the way you love a place that has held you through everything, even when the shelter itself is imperfect. She loved it more than she let anyone at school know. At Jefferson High, the geography of the lunchroom told you everything. The girls with the freshest sneakers and the longest nails sat closest to the windows. The athletes clustered near the side doors. And Maya, with her thrift store jacket and the same 3 rotating outfits she wore on a careful weekly schedule, sat at the end table near the trash cans, usually alone, her notebook open, her eyes down. It was not that she was invisible. It was worse than that. She was seen in the way people see something they have already decided how to feel about. Classmates whispered just loud enough for her to catch the edges. She smells like the laundromat. Did you see her shoes? She literally glued them back together. Their laughter did not crack her, but it layered itself over her day by day, like sediment settling over something that was once bright. Her mother, Denise Johnson, worked 2 jobs and never complained about either one. Mornings at the laundromat on Ashland Avenue, evenings washing dishes at a soul food restaurant 4 blocks away. She came home smelling of other people's clothes and industrial soap, and she always asked Maya about her day before she asked for anything at all. Maya always said, "Fine, Mama. Everything is fine." Denise had not believed that answer in over a year, but she understood why her daughter kept giving it. Some truths, if spoken out loud, become heavier for the speaking. The debt that hung over their lives had been left behind by a man named Gerald Johnson, who had walked out 6 years ago and left nothing but a broken television and $42,000 in loans owed to a company called Prestige Capital Lending, whose collection practices occupied a legal gray zone so murky it might as well have been pitch black. Denise had been chipping away at it, 200 here, 300 there, while the interest compounded silently in the background like a slow leak inside the ceiling. One Thursday evening in February, Denise pressed a folded $20 bill into Maya's hand with the soft insistence of someone who had rehearsed the gesture many times before. "Go get something with your friends this weekend, baby. Some coffee or whatever you all do." Maya looked at the bill. She knew exactly what it had cost. She knew her mother had skipped lunch again to save it. "Mama, I don't need. Take it, please." Denise's voice had that particular tenderness that was also a wall. "Let me feel like I'm giving you something good." Maya took it. She folded it carefully and placed it in the small, zippered pocket of her backpack, where she kept things too important to lose. That night, lying in the dark, she tried to imagine sitting with girls from school at some bright cafe, drinking something warm, laughing about nothing. She tried to make the scene feel real. She could not do it. There was no version of that picture that felt like it belonged to her life. The $20 stayed folded and untouched. It became, without her consciously deciding so, something close to a talisman. Proof that her mother loved her. Proof that she was worth something to someone, even on the days the rest of the world had not yet received that particular piece of information. The following Saturday, Maya took the long way home from the public library, cutting through the edge of Grant Park where the bare winter trees stood in rows like patient witnesses to everything that passed beneath them. It was the kind of cold that made the air feel thin, and most people moved through it with their chins tucked and their eyes fixed on the pavement ahead. She almost walked past him. He was sitting on a green bench near the fountain that had been switched off for the season, and he looked, at first glance, like any of the older men who sometimes slept rough in the park when the shelters were full. His coat was dark and plain, his shoes ordinary, his silver hair ruffled and loose in the wind. He was not sleeping. He was hunched forward with both hands pressed flat on his knees, breathing slowly and deliberately, like a man trying to manage something happening inside his own chest. "Excuse me." His voice was low and careful, addressed to no one in particular, or perhaps to everyone, or perhaps simply to the universe itself. "I need to make a call. Someone took my bag." A woman in a red coat walked past without slowing. A young man in earbuds glanced over and kept moving. Maya stopped. Later, she would not be able to explain exactly why. She had been ignored enough times herself to understand precisely how invisible a person could become the moment they became inconvenient. She thought of her mother's voice, the way it sounded on the nights when Denise was most tired and most honest. "Baby, people look away because they are scared. Do not let their fear become yours." She approached the bench and crouched down slightly so that she was at his eye level, the way her mother had always done when speaking to her as a small child, so the little girl would know she was truly being seen. "Sir, are you okay?" The old man looked up at her. His eyes were gray and sharp, and, underneath the current of obvious discomfort, deeply attentive. He looked at her the way very few people ever looked at Maya Johnson, like she was someone worth looking at properly. "I had a dizzy spell," he said carefully, "and while I was sitting here, someone took my bag. My phone, my wallet, everything. I do not live far, but I cannot—" He paused, and something flickered in his expression that looked very much like shame. "I am embarrassed to ask." "Don't be." Maya had already unzipped the small pocket. She took out the folded $20 bill, the one her mother had pressed into her hand with such exhausted love. She held it out toward him. "For a cab, please." The old man stared at the bill for a long moment. Then he looked at her face, then back at the bill. "This is your money," he said. "I know. I'm a complete stranger to you. I know that too." Then why? Maya thought about it honestly, the way she always tried to think about things. "Because you needed it more than I needed to hold on to it," she finally said. "And because if I were the one sitting on this bench, I would want someone to stop." The old man was quiet for a moment that stretched long and full. The wind moved through the space between them. "What is your name?" he asked. "Maya." "Maya Johnson." He nodded slowly, like a man committing something to memory that he intended to keep. "My name is Vincent," he said. "Vincent Moretti." She helped him flag down a cab. She stood on the curb and watched it pull away into the gray Chicago afternoon. Then she walked home with empty hands and felt, strangely, lighter than she had in months. She did not know, walking away, that Vincent Moretti had spent 2 decades as one of the most feared men in the city. She did not know that he had retired from that life years earlier, after his only son was killed in the kind of violence that Vincent himself had once dealt in without flinching. She did not know that he had spent the years since trying to quietly undo some portion of the damage he had done, funding legal clinics and food programs and youth centers under a foundation that bore his last name, but not his former reputation. She did not know that he had been sitting on that bench, not just because of the dizziness and the stolen bag, but because he sometimes sat in public places alone and tried to remember what it felt like to be an ordinary person among ordinary people. She did not know any of that. She only knew that she had done what her mother had raised her to do. Monday morning at Jefferson High began the way most Monday mornings began for Maya, with the low, familiar hum of cruelty that passes for social life in places where no one has taught the young how to be kind to the unfamiliar. Someone had left a crumpled fast food bag on her desk. A cluster of girls near the window laughed without quite looking at her directly, which was almost more insulting than if they had met her eyes. A boy she had never spoken to told his friend, at a volume designed to carry, that she probably did her shopping at the nearest dumpster. Maya sat down, removed the bag from her desk without a word, opened her notebook, and wrote the date at the top of the page. She was very good at this. She had practiced it into something close to an art form. It was during second period that the sound came from outside. The distinct, low purr of an engine that did not belong anywhere near this neighborhood. Heads turned toward the windows. Maya, sitting near the back, did not look up at first. What is that? A black SUV, polished to a mirror finish, had stopped in front of the school with the quiet authority of a vehicle that had never once worried about a parking ticket. The driver stepped out in a dark suit and opened the rear door with practiced precision. Vincent Moretti stepped on a sidewalk. Even from the second floor, he was unmistakable. The silver hair was combed with care. The coat was cashmere. The posture was the posture of a man who had, at some point in his life, made a decision to stop apologizing for the space he occupied. Maya felt her stomach drop directly through the floor. She was called to the main office 4 minutes later. She walked the hallway with the specific, unpleasant dread of someone who has done nothing wrong and is afraid of becoming conspicuous anyway. Vincent was standing in the center of Principal Harris's office, and Principal Harris was standing extremely straight in a way that made clear he had not sat down since the visitor arrived. Mr. Thompson, her homeroom teacher, the one who had twice this semester spoken to Maya, with a sharpness he did not apply to students whose parents drove nicer cars, was also present, and he was holding his hands in front of him like a man attending a funeral. Vincent turned when Maya entered. He crossed the room in 3 steps and extended his hand. "Maya Johnson," he said, "I have been looking for you." He told her he had gone back to the park bench the following morning and asked the staff if anyone knew a young woman named Maya who passed through on Saturdays. It had taken several days of quiet inquiry. Then he reached into his breast pocket and produced the folded $20 bill and a plain white card that held nothing but his name and a phone number. "The 20 is yours," he said simply. "I know what it cost you to give it." He placed the card in her hand beside it. "And this is not a gift. It is a promise. If you or anyone in your family ever find yourselves in a situation where you genuinely do not know where to turn, you call that number. Any hour. I will answer." Maya looked at the card. Its plainness made it feel more serious than anything that could have been printed on expensive letterhead. "I just did what anyone should have done," she said. "Yes," Vincent agreed quietly. "But you were the only one who did." That night, she told her mother only that she had helped an old man find a cab the previous Saturday. Denise nodded and said, "Good, baby. That is my girl." Maya did not mention the card. It felt like something to hold privately, the way you hold a candle rather than a torch. You do not wave it around. You keep it close for when the dark grows very deep. The dark grew very deep on a Wednesday. Maya heard the knock at 8:47 in the evening. She knew, before she heard the voice, that it was not the knock of ordinary intentions. It was the kind of knock with force behind it, something barely contained and not particularly interested in containing itself. "Open up. I know you are in there." Denise was already on her feet, her face a color Maya had never seen on it before. The door held for 3 more strikes. Then something gave, and Dale Cooper filled the doorframe. He was large the way certain men are large, not just in body but in the amount of space they take without asking. He wore a jacket with a company logo on it, the logo of Prestige Capital Lending, which was itself a kind of dark joke. He smelled of cigarettes and something sharper, and he looked around the apartment with the slow contempt of someone cataloging what little there was. "You know why I am here," he said to Denise. "Enough extensions. Tonight we settle, or we start talking about other arrangements." Denise stood between Dale and Maya with the automatic, bone-deep geometry of a mother. "Mr. Cooper, please. I have been paying consistently. I only need a little more time. I promise you I will." "I do not want promises." He picked up the framed photograph from the shelf near the door, the one of Maya at age 7, sitting on her father's shoulders before everything fell apart, looked at it without interest, and set it back. "And if you cannot produce the balance, then maybe we discuss what else is available." He was not looking at the furniture when he said it. Maya moved before she had consciously decided to. She stepped forward and placed herself beside her mother. "Get out of our home," she said. Dale Cooper looked at her, the way certain adults look at teenagers who speak out of turn, with a slow and dismissive amusement that is its own kind of violence. "Sit down, little girl." I said, "Get out." He stepped toward Denise. He reached out one large hand. Maya's hand was already inside her backpack. Her fingers found the small, zippered pocket. They were shaking so badly she had to try 3 times to open it. She pulled out the card. She thought, "I cannot call this man about something like this. He is not a rescue service. This is not his problem. This is too small for someone like him. This is embarrassing." Dale's hand closed on her mother's arm. She dialed. 2 rings. "This is Vincent." Maya's voice came out in fragments. She gave the address. She said there was a man in their home. She said her mother was being hurt. She heard herself say words she had never said to any adult outside her family. "Please, I do not know what else to do." "Give me the exact address," Vincent said, in the same unhurried tone one might use to confirm a restaurant reservation. "And Maya, listen to me carefully. You are not going to do anything that puts you in danger. You stay close to your mother. You do not provoke anything, and you trust me to handle what comes next. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good. I am on my way." She kept the phone low against her leg. She counted her own heartbeats because it gave her something to count. She counted 13 minutes before she heard a car stop outside. Vincent Moretti did not come alone. He came with a woman in a gray suit who carried a leather portfolio and who was, Maya would learn later, one of the finest civil attorneys practicing in the city of Chicago. Dale Cooper turned from the center of the room when they entered, and something shifted in his expression, not quite fear, but a kind of recalculation. Vincent looked at him for a long moment without speaking. There was no threat in the look. That was precisely what made it so difficult to stand under. "Please sit down," Vincent said, to everyone, including Dale. Dale did not sit, but he also did not move. Vincent sat at the kitchen table. He set his hands flat against the surface, that same careful gesture Maya had first seen on the park bench, a man managing something internal. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and even. "Your name is Dale Cooper. You have a daughter. Her name is Lily. She is 9 years old, and she goes to Garfield Elementary on the west side." Dale went completely still. "I'm not saying that to threaten you," Vincent said. "I'm saying it because I want you to understand that I know who you are. Not what you do for this company, who you actually are." A pause. "And I think if you allow yourself the honesty, you know the difference too." The attorney opened the portfolio without a word and placed a document on the table. A full accounting of the original loan, every payment Denise had made, and the remaining balance calculated at the legal maximum interest rate permitted under Illinois law. "That is what is owed," Vincent said. "Not what your employer has been telling this family. What is actually legally owed. That amount I am paying tonight, in full. In exchange, this debt is retired permanently, and there will be no further contact with the Johnson family by anyone associated with Prestige Capital Lending." He held Dale's eyes. "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Dale's jaw moved. "You can't just." "I already have." Vincent reached into his coat and produced a plain envelope. He did not slide it across the table aggressively. He simply held it. "This contains the number for the Cook County Legal Aid Society and 2 personal references. If you want a way out of the work you have been doing, there are people who will help you find it. I will vouch for you personally. That offer does not expire tonight, but it will expire." He set the envelope on the table. "Tonight, you can simply leave." The room held a silence, so complete Maya could hear the radiator in the wall doing its old, familiar clanking. Dale Cooper looked at the document. He looked at Denise, who sat with her hands folded and her chin lifted, wearing the exhausted, undefeated dignity of a woman who had survived every hard thing she had ever been handed. He looked at Maya, who stood near the wall with her arms crossed and her face giving nothing away. Something moved through Dale Cooper's face then. It was not dramatic. It did not announce itself with any outward sign. It was the quiet kind of shift that happens when a person catches, in the space between one breath and the next, a clear and honest glimpse of themselves from the outside. He looked at his own hands. My daughter asked me last week what I do for work. He said, very quietly, to no one in particular. I told her I work in finance. He exhaled slowly through his nose. She said, "Do you help people, Daddy?" Vincent waited. "I did not answer her," Dale said. He picked up the envelope. He held it with both hands for a moment, the way you hold something you're not sure you deserve. Then he put it in his jacket pocket. He looked at Denise. "I am sorry," he said. The words came out rough, like they had been stored somewhere painful for a long time. "I am genuinely sorry for tonight, and for before." He looked at Maya. "I am sorry to you as well." Maya looked at him for a long moment. A real moment, not a polite one. She looked at him the way she had looked at the old man on the park bench, like a person trying to actually see another person. Then she nodded. One small, clean nod that cost her something real and gave something real back in equal measure. "Okay," she said. Just that one word. But she meant it. Dale Cooper walked out. He pulled the broken door closed behind him as best he could. His footsteps went down the stairs and did not come back. Vincent stayed for another hour. He called a repair service about the door. He sat with Denise and Maya and drank the instant coffee Maya made because it was the only thing in the cabinet, and he drank it without comment and without the expression of a man enduring something beneath him. Before he left, he looked at Maya from the doorway. "You know," he said, "I spent many years of my life believing that power meant making people afraid." He shook his head slowly. "What you did on that bench, with $20 and no reason except that it was right, that did something to me that I did not expect." He paused. "I'd been sitting in that park for a long time before you came along. Not just that afternoon." She did not fully understand what he meant until much later, when she knew more of his history, the years he did not describe in detail, but also did not pretend had not existed. What she understood that night, in the wreckage of her kitchen, holding a mug of too strong instant coffee, was something simpler. Goodness is not naive. It is, in fact, the bravest thing available to any of us. And it moves through the world in ways that are impossible to predict and impossible to fully stop once they have begun. The weeks that followed changed the landscape of the Johnson household in ways that were quiet at first and then impossible to ignore. Denise was offered a position as a community outreach coordinator at the Moretti Foundation, a nonprofit focused on economic mobility in Chicago's South Side. The salary was more than she had made at both jobs combined. She accepted with the careful dignity of a woman who had worked for every good thing and was not going to be embarrassed about finally receiving one. Maya received a letter confirming a full scholarship to the University of Illinois at Chicago, funded through the Foundation's education initiative. She read it 3 times standing at the kitchen counter, then sat down on the floor, which was not something she had planned to do. At Jefferson High, the morning after Vincent Moretti's visit to the main office, Mr. Thompson stopped Maya in the hallway. He looked the way people look when they're doing something that is genuinely costing them something. "Maya," he cleared his throat, "I want to apologize for the way I have spoken to you this year. I have not been consistent or fair, and that is not who I intend to be as a teacher." He met her eyes. "I am sorry." Maya thought of Dale Cooper standing in her kitchen with that envelope held in both hands. She thought of what it must cost a person to look honestly at themselves in the middle of the life they have been living. "Thank you for saying that," she told him. "I mean it." 2 of her classmates, a girl named Brianna and a quieter girl named Sophia, began sitting with her at lunch. It was tentative at first. Then, gradually, it simply was not. Something had shifted in the room. Not everything, and not all at once, but enough. Enough to breathe differently in. 3 months after the night he walked out of the Johnson apartment, Dale Cooper called the number in the envelope. He gave Vincent Moretti's name as a reference. He left Prestige Capital Lending. He found different work. He did not know, and might never know, whether everyone he harmed would find a way to forgive him. But he understood, sitting in that office waiting for a call to be returned, that the question of his own becoming had to be separate from that. You cannot wait for forgiveness before you begin the work of being better. You simply have to begin, and then you have to keep going. 4 years later, Maya Johnson graduated from the University of Illinois at Chicago with a degree in social work. Vincent Mority sat in the audience next to Denise, and when Maya crossed the stage, the two of them stood up before the applause was officially invited, which embarrassed Maya and moved her beyond any words she had available. She met Vincent for coffee 2 weeks later at a small place in the neighborhood where she had grown up. She brought him a piece of her mother's sweet potato pie wrapped in foil because she had learned by then that it was his favorite thing. "What comes next for you?" he asked. "I'm starting a mentorship program," she said, "for kids in this neighborhood. Teenagers mostly. Kids who are the way I was." She paused. Invisible, or something worse than invisible. Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Then what will you call it?" Maya looked out the window at the street she had walked 10,000 times in her life. The park bench where everything had changed was 4 blocks away. She still walked past it sometimes and thought about things she could not quite put into proper words, the way gratitude and grief and hope sometimes fold themselves into a single feeling that has no name, because no single name would be enough. "I'm calling it Someone Stopped," she said. Vincent looked at her for a long, still moment. His gray eyes, older now, but no less sharp, held something that was very close to peace. "Your mother raised someone remarkable," he said. "She did," Maya agreed. "And then you reminded me of it when I had nearly forgotten." She reached across the small table and placed her hand briefly over his, those old and careful hands that had done so many things in their long life, some of them terrible, some of them quietly redemptive, all of them leading, somehow, to a park bench in February and a girl who stopped. In the end, the $20 was never really about money. It was about the decision to stop when every force in the world is telling you to keep moving. It was about the radical, almost unreasonable act of choosing to see another human being as exactly that, a human being carrying their own invisible weight, deserving of dignity and care and the simple, enormous gift of someone's genuine attention. Maya stopped. Vincent Moretti found his way back to something he had almost given up on entirely. Dale Cooper was offered a door and, eventually, chose to walk through it. Denise Johnson was given the chance, at last, to breathe without counting every breath. And somewhere on the west side of Chicago, a 9-year-old girl named Lily Cooper still does not know the full truth of what her father did during a particular chapter of his life. But she knows that one evening he came home different, that he held her for a long time without explaining why, and that from that night forward, whenever she asked him, "Daddy, are you a good person?" he would look at her with complete seriousness and say, "I'm trying to be, baby, every single day." That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you would like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next chapter we are preparing for you.